This is what I want to see a little bit more of in Thomas Frank's system. We want to see Xavi Simons come central and help us with the issues that we're currently having in build-up. Spurs kicked off their Champions League campaign yesterday against Villarreal with a 1-0 win. It wasn't the most convincing performance in the world, and I think a lot of Spurs fans maybe came away feeling a little bit underwhelmed. But having watched the game back, I think there were maybe more positives to take away from it than maybe we realised at the time. That being said, there are still issues. We're going to talk about in this video about how maybe Thomas Frank can fix them and rectify them going forward. I think the encouraging thing is that Thomas Frank came out after the game and echoed a lot of the thoughts of the Spurs fans that we have become a really defensively stable team so far under him. That platform is there. I think it's just the attacking issues that kind of need refinement and those build-up issues. So I think he recognises it as well, and it might just take a little bit of time to implement those things. If you are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe and like the video as well. I want to talk about the issues that Spurs were having in build-up. I want to talk about some of the positives in terms of our pressing shape. I want to talk about Xavi Simons, about his relationship with Jed Spence. I want to talk about Kudus and Porro. I want to talk about our defensive solidity and mainly kind of what we can do to rectify the issues that we are having in build-up. Before we do that, let's talk about the goal. Let's start off with the positive because we went 1-0 up in the opening few minutes in the game, and despite the fact that it was a monumentally bad goalkeeping error that gave us the lead, there were still positives to take from it, and you can kind of see what Thomas Frank is trying to do, especially with Lucas Bergvall here. Pedro Porro jumps to win that ball back. I thought Pedro Porro is actually kind of going under the radar in terms of his defending in this team. He didn't have a great game against Semenyo, against Bournemouth, but I think since then he has been pretty solid. And I think his reading of the game in kind of picking up on these little loose balls, in particular in this game, was something that I found really impressive. He allows it to come there to Kudus, who can turn and move up the pitch. And I like the fact that we saw Kudus, and I'm going to talk about him a little bit later, in some of these more central areas yesterday. There aren't really many options for him, so he kind of circles back, but he has got that just low centre of gravity to be able to feel contact at his back and then shift the other way. And this is what I like about Lucas Bergvall here. We spoke about our build-up kind of dynamics on that right-hand side, about having maybe 2 on the line and 1 inside. It was quite difficult to kind of open teams up and create little triangles for combinations, but this was a lot better. See here where you've got Porro on the line, Bergvall and Kudus inside, and then what you are able to do then, Bergvall is able to kind of make this run in behind here. It's a lot better for Spurs to kind of create combinations when you are playing like that. Porro can kind of play this pass around the corner and Bergvall can run into this space and we open them up. Bergvall comes in, and that's the value of having, despite the fact that we haven't really got a creative player in that number 10 position, and there are massive downsides of that, when you have got 2 kind of runners in Sarr and Bergvall kind of playing as 8s, when you are able to create those combinations to draw teams out and kind of attack the space in behind that's left, as we kind of signalled here, 1 on the line, 2 inside, easier to kind of create those little triangles for this kind of movement to open teams up. When you've got those willing runners in Bergvall and Sarr, that does cause problems for teams. And Bergvall, it's a good ball in, it's a teasing ball, it's a good bit of movement by Richarlison to kind of make the keeper think, but it is obviously a very bad error. Again, on another positive point, before we get to some of the more negative stuff, I thought our pressing was really good yesterday. A man-to-man pressing shape that was forcing errors. I spoke about before the game about a kind of applying that. Villarreal conceding goal against Atletico Madrid at the weekend, kind of making a mistake playing out from the back, and I think Spurs really kind of locked onto that defence man for man. You can see here, you've got Simons, Sarr, Bergvall, Kudus, Richarlison, all kind of occupying a man-to-man presser. Simons there on the right back. They kind of build it up in a 3. You've got Kudus on Vega, Bergvall on Gay, and then Sarr on the other centre midfielder there. And they kind of, as it moved on, they all move with them. Again, you can see Simons coming out here, Richarlison applying that pressure. Kudus still locked on. Bergvall and Sarr, as I mentioned, it wasn't the midfield pair that I expected for Villarreal, and I thought Bergvall and Sarr should play because of their energy in midfield, and I thought this was going to be vital. Obviously, it was a different pair, but I do think it really worked, having those 2 that could really harry and press in there. Again, you're seeing it still, Spurs still locked on man-to-man here, keeping that shape, keeping that discipline, not really allowing Villarreal to open up any angles, moving with them all together. And when you're forced to kind of play balls down the line here, what I do really like about the strength of the dual winners in our team is that you've got Spence, who's really good at coming kind of up the back of that winger when he does receive it with the ball, with his back to goal, and he's able to kind of force a turnover here, forces them backwards. Again, you can still see Spurs locked on man-to-man here. Sarr, what I like about Sarr is he knows it's very well organised. The discipline's there. Sarr replaces Spence. He locks on to the man there, and Spence then follows Pepe inside. But it's still man-to-man press. Very well organised, very well disciplined. They all know what they're doing. Richarlison then jumps. Again, you can see them here. You've got 4 pressing across that front line behind the striker, but there's a much better kind of solid base than maybe there was at last season under Ange Postecoglou. We kind of saw us pressing in a 4-1-4-1 shape. Here it's kind of a 3-2-4-1 here in terms of our pressing, which does give you that protection if Villarreal were somehow able to get out of the press here, and I thought we did it really well to suffocate them. Again, you can see here, Sarr, man-to-man, it's good stuff. And we force it out wide, and then, again, I talk about those kind of dual winners and the strength here. Sarr gets in, puts pressure on the man, and it goes out. So I really liked our pressing shape here, that man-to-man approach. But I did think the issues that we were having yesterday came in our build-up, and we spoke about that after West Ham, and I do think something needs to change a little bit with that. And I think Thomas Frank has probably recognised that as well. And one thing I would say, like I said earlier in the video, is that most of the bulk of the work that Frank and the coaching staff had to do when they came into the summer, and Matt Wells has worked a lot on it, and I think Romero name-checked him in the press conference before the game, actually, was defensive solidity, set pieces, those kind of things, the things that we were really bad at for the most part under Ange last season. So there might be, it's kind of almost might seem like there's an overcorrection in these kind of early stages because we are sacrificing quite a lot, maybe in terms of our attacking game and our patterns and our chance creation, etc. Didn't create loads from open play yesterday and weren't able to really penetrate Villarreal in terms of our build-up play. But I do think that will be short-term pain for long-term game in that aspect to make us really, really solid, and then we can start to tweak those little things. But you can kind of see some of the issues here, right? So Bentancur, it was sort of a flat 4-3-3, but we did see Bentancur as kind of the one dropping in a lot of the time. Bentancur was kind of the one dropping in as Spurs would build out. Porro kind of out wide, out on the right-hand side. And what Romero was kind of trying to do, and it was to our detriment and also to our gain a little bit, he's so excellent at punching these kind of balls, these risky balls from this position into the centre of midfield there. And Romero was able to do that at times. I think the issue is that when you haven't got a player that's necessarily comfortable on the half turn or as comfortable on the half turn, like Pat Matasar, that's not really his kind of game in there. So I think you're not really seeing the benefit in our build-up of Romero playing these risky passes because that's not really Sarr's game to kind of take this and then maybe take the risk to kind of turn on the half turn and kind of get into this area to take two players out of the game. Romero's kind of broken a line there, opened up the pitch for Spurs, but we haven't really seen any benefit from it because it's maybe not the sort of players that you want receiving those sorts of passes, if that makes sense. It's not really what Sarr's about, and you can kind of see he sort of plays the safe option. He kind of almost panics a little bit, and by that time you kind of got four players kind of in that sort of triangle around you, or in that sort of square around you, and they sort of have to play back while Sarr's under pressure. And to be fair, with the fact that it has attracted men, it does mean that Spurs can then kind of quickly move the ball from the centre out to the left here. But this, I think, was the issue that we were having a lot of the time with this dynamic with Spence and Simmons. However, this was actually an example of where it can work. We didn't really see Spence kind of getting off that line too often. We kind of saw Spurs kind of building up with that double width on that left-hand side with Spence and Simmons on the same line, meaning that Spence was kind of playing the ball into Simmons with his back to goal a lot of time, and there wasn't really many options on for him. But I like this from Spence where he does kind of make that run off the line into this space, and Simmons can, you know, in an ideal world, sort of knock it into that path for Spence to kind of run into. But Simmons chooses not to in that aspect and kind of moves back, and then Spurs kind of have to recycle and go again. But what it also does do, to be fair, in this instance, with Simmons kind of coming inside, again, maybe in an ideal world, you'd like Simmons to kind of play that ball first time around the corner, or play it around the corner into Richarlison. We can kind of turn and drive from there. But I spoke about those kind of number 8s in Sarr and Bergvall with their willingness to run. We see Bergvall kind of make a run here in behind and over the top, and it doesn't quite work out. So again, there was kind of a mixture of the good and the bad in kind of that example, really. But it does allow us to kind of, by those playing those long balls and making their defenders do something, making their goalkeeper kind of commit, it means that we can get a throw in and kind of increase pressure that way. So it's not all bad stuff, right? But again, sometimes you see, what we did see here was Van de Ven out to Spence, and then Spence, because of the angles that he's receiving at, because he's right-footed, a lot of the time he's coming back inside and things are kind of breaking down, and Spurs are then forced to sort of recycle. There's no one really in the centre of the pitch here. There's so much kind of space in the centre. No one's really in the pocket to sort of receive. However, again, on the flip side, and this is something that I kind of noticed a little bit more when I watched the game back, is that when you do that and you have got players like Porro with the passing range they have got, that switch is on and it's a really good ball out to Simmons. And when you've got someone with the 1v1 ability in these wide areas, moving it around like that, if you can kind of get that ball over to the other side of the pitch quickly, again, it's not the worst thing in the world for Spurs. So again, you're kind of seeing a mixture of the good and the bad, really. And with Spurs' counter-pressing, as we kind of spoke about earlier, if you can get those direct balls, and even if Simmons can't beat his man 1v1, there was a lot of hunger from him and the tenacity from him and the other players around him to help win it back. So again, you're kind of seeing an example of the good and the bad. But you see here, again, there's kind of a lot of space in here. Romero is sort of, you can see him conducting in this example. So he wants someone to kind of come short to open things up quickly through the centre, but he doesn't. Sarr and Bentancur kind of take too late to drop in, and we have to move out to Van de Ven, and it's out to Spence again and again here. He wants to. You can kind of see that because of the angle that he's facing the ball at here, he doesn't check back inside on this example, but he can't open his body up to maybe play a ball first time to Simmons here, who is in a good position. Like, I think you want Simmons in this sort of pocket here if he's going to play on that left-hand side. Like, you want the dynamics on that left-hand side to enable him to get into more central areas. I'm fine with him playing as a winger, but only if we kind of optimise it in the right way. But Spence's body position, because he's right-footed, doesn't allow himself to kind of maybe play that first-time pass into that space. So he kind of takes his time over it and then ends up kind of fluffing up the pass. I thought Spence was actually a bit sloppy yesterday, which didn't help as well. But again, kind of another example that you sort of roll on here. Van de Ven out to Simmons. And Simmons kind of tries to check inside. In this example here, again, I think you can sort of see maybe what we're trying to do come together a little bit. Van de Ven, what I quite liked in this example was rather than playing this ball out to Spence, he does kind of he does give it to Simmons. And what you don't mind with Spence is that he is okay on the overlap. If you can kind of get that ball into Simmons first time rather than giving it into Spence, I think the move has a lot less chance of breaking down, because when Simmons does receive it, he has got the quality with his first touch to just kind of explode into this area, but he doesn't at that time. He tries to do that, but he gets tackled. But I think, again, there's going to be opportunities for Simmons to do that. He will get away and commit players, and then Spence can get round. So again, you're kind of seeing a mixture of the good and the bad. It just didn't quite work out that time. But again, there were frustrations. Ball comes out to Spence again here. Simmons comes and offering something down the line. But again, because of his body position, he can't quite open the pass up that quickly. Can't open his body up enough quickly enough to get that ball down the line first time. So again, we have to work the ball back inside. And it's kind of that horseshoe football a little bit. And again, the benefit of it, I suppose, is when you have got, like I said earlier, you have got eights in Sarr and Bergvall who do want to make those runs in behind. If you've got Porro as that kind of weapon, as that free man to be able to play those balls down the line, it's not so bad if you kind of have to keep recycling a little bit. But playing those long balls isn't always going to lead to opportunities. But what it does do is allow you to kind of build pressure in the final third. And Sarr gets it there. And then you have got bodies in the box, which is what Franks wants. So again, you can kind of see why he wants to do this, right? It is frustrating when attacks do break down that left-hand side, but it does allow Porro to kind of flex his range of passing, which does allow you to kind of get in or make runs in behind and then kind of create pressure from that. And when we've got players in Sarr and Bergvall that can win the second balls, it's not as exciting as maybe we want it to be, and you're not maybe optimising your most creative player, but you can see the benefits of doing it as well, right? And here it does allow you, from Sarr winning that ball and kind of playing it back, Kudus to get into this sort of position. And this is where there is so much value in kind of Kudus being such a good two-way winger, is that he comes inside here, feints to come inside, and then goes to the byline and tries to get the cross. And you've got men in the box. Like, Frank wants balls in the box. So again, there is value to being that little bit more direct. The cutback comes to Bentancur on the edge of the box, and that's actually a really good opportunity, but he just kind of fluffs it with the shot. Again here, building up with that kind of three at the back. Bentancur out to Van de Ven. Van de Ven back inside to Bentancur, back out to Romero. Here, Romero out to Porro. It's just the only issue is on this kind of right-hand side at times is that when you've got Porro and Kudus both on the line at the same time, it is quite easy to almost defend against, and Spurs kind of have to come back inside. There's nowhere really to go in that kind of where we're playing with that 4-3-3 versus their 4-4-2. There were instances where our build-up amounts to nothing because there's just nowhere really to go. Kudus has to come back inside, and then we end up losing the ball, right? Again, a kind of another example here. Van de Ven out to Romero. Romero, again, this is such an excellent pass. Sarr is in for it here, and this is what Spurs were able to do at times, but again, it's just not quite the guy that you necessarily want receiving it. It's the risk reward. It's good from Romero, right? Really good pass, but Sarr hasn't necessarily got the technical ability to kind of bring that down, go on the half turn, or make something of it, or maybe fire this ball first time out to Bergvall, and then we can kind of run. He just makes a bit of a mess of it, right? So I think we're kind of almost getting the wrong players in the wrong zones when we're kind of playing the right sort of passes at times. Maybe, if that makes sense, it's not optimal for the guys that you want receiving those sorts of balls. Whereas here in the first half, there were moments where Xavi Simons took the initiative to get a little bit more central, and I did enjoy that kind of freedom that he has got, I suppose, but maybe we just didn't see it enough. Vicario out to Romero there. Romero, again, there's just no one really kind of dropping in, but then Xavi does it. And if you can get Xavi in these sorts of areas, that's where we want him. Again, this doesn't really amount to anything, but you want that caliber of player in these kind of areas, really, to allow you to turn out and then build something from there. I want to see a little bit more of that with Simons coming centrally. And maybe one way that we can fix this is building up in kind of the 3 that we saw in the first pre-season game against Reading. I don't know where the ball's gone on the tactics board here, but we'll use the little JLA button, for example, here. When this is kind of how Reading was setting up and sort of pressing us. You've got Romero, Porro, and Van der Ven in that back line, Bentancur and Sarr kind of operating as that pivot in here, offering passes to sort of combine. And you can do that. And then what Udogie, rather than Spence, out on that left-hand side, Udogie's a much more natural width holder who's comfortable in those areas. It allows you to get Simons into these central pockets where Spurs have got enough good ball players here to kind of bounce little triangles to move a press about with Romero, and Bentancur. He's quite good receiving as that sort of little bounce pass. He might be a little bit limited on the ball, but he does move the ball quickly, and you've got these kind of little triangles here that you can manipulate the press, get the ball out to Van der Ven, and then out to Udogie. And then what you do see is this little pass here, and then Udogie on the overlap, Simons into him, and then you're kind of away. That combination play there. Or a kind of another way, which we saw this against Reading as well, was Bentancur sort of dropping in to the 3, and Bentancur having this ability. Or we also saw at times Kinski in goal kind of building up in that 3 as well, and kind of having the spare man in midfield when Kinski's good so good on the ball. It kind of does add a lot of value there with someone that is that good in terms of their passing range. But Bentancur here was able to find this pass out to Udogie quite a bit, and again, he can kind of bounce it into Simons, or you can kind of have Richarlison come a bit deeper and then sort of Simons come into this pocket here. You want Simons in these kind of zones, really. I just feel like we're not necessarily optimising his ability to create at the moment, but it wasn't all negative from a Simons point of view by any stretch of the imagination. There was quite a lot to enjoy from what I saw, to be honest. Again, it's moments like this where you can kind of see his quality in crowded areas. Here, he uses Richarlison sort of as that springboard that he can then play off. Richarlison's hold-up play was really mixed last night. I thought it was quite poor overall, but that was quite good, and he can kind of combine there and he can get into these central areas. And what I did like as well is that we saw Kudus a lot more centrally than we did at the weekend against West Ham as well. I do really like him as that touchline threat because I think his ability to go both ways adds so much value, right? But I did kind of like him in these areas as well because he's so strong and can take so many players out the game. And if you can get Kudus and Simons combining in these sorts of areas, I think that can really be beneficial. And I've got a few more examples of that here. Look how many players Kudus takes out the game here. Drives with it, and then he can kind of play that little clip pass. There's another example where he takes a lot of players out the game as well to show. Porro then tries that little headed pass over the top to Bergvall. But it comes back to Kudus and he can get that cross into the box. And again, you're speaking of those crosses that Thomas Franks loves to do. Long ball up the line here, which Van der Ven intercepts. Bentancur in there, who kind of gets that first time. He wins the tackle there and can play this ball first time into Kudus. Bentancur, I did think, was actually quite okay on the ball yesterday. He gets the ball into Kudus here, and again in a more central area. And this is where you really see him take players with him. Drives and drives and drives, so strong. And then it comes to Spence on that left-hand side. Again, you can get Simons in the more sort of dangerous pockets here with Spence in areas where he is more comfortable out here. And then you do kind of see the value of him being able to play with that right foot by checking back inside. Because you've kind of moved them into shape with Kudus taking players out of the game, they're not necessarily set, which sets you up nicely for a shot from distance from Sarr, which was only shot on target. Think of the game, actually. Again, you see here the value of Spurs is pressing. And what it does do is allow you to get Simons and Kudus in their most dangerous areas as well in central positions, because that aggressive press forcing them to go long. You've got a lot of good duel winners and good aerial duel winners and ground duel winners as well to kind of hoover these up. Bentancur wins the header, Sarr wins the second header, and look where Kudus is. And this is where he can really use his strength to kind of wrestle and muscle away. Drives. This is such a good bit of skill here. Just thinking quickly, 2 players around him, little drag back, and then he can go. Plays it to Simons, and this is where you want Xavi Simons as well. He's not a left winger, but he does like to operate in that left half space. And you see the little combination play here. It's a lovely run from Kudus. Good game intelligence to... why does that happen with the arrow? Let's just do another. Kudus runs into kind of this space to open up the space for Simons to come inside. He can either get a shot off from there. he can kind of play a little 1-2 with Bergvall where he can come there and then he can sort of get into this space here to get a shot off. And that's what he kind of tries to do. Does get that little pass into Bergvall. He tries to flick it back to him, and you can see Simons wanting to kind of make the run in here. There was the appeals for handball, and it comes down to Simons, and he does get the shot off. So again, that's what I do really like with those two. You want to get them in those kind of central pockets, especially Xavi Simons coming off that left-hand side. And again, you kind of saw it in the second half as well with Kudus driving inside, and you got Simons out on that left-hand side. It's just the pass wasn't quite there with the final ball. But again, these are the sorts of areas where you want Kudus coming inside to, Simons receiving the ball in those kind of areas where he can come in off that left-hand side and you can get Spence up the pitch and round him a little bit more, which we did actually see an example of in the second half. Speaking of Mohamed Kudus, I really enjoyed his kind of dynamic and link up with Pedro Porro on that right-hand side. I do think they're forming quite a good partnership because of his ability to go two ways. I don't think the double width on that side with them playing on the same line is much of an issue because Kudus is more unpredictable, right? And there's a good example of build-up here where you see Van der Ven fire that pass into Richarlison rather than going out to Spence to kind of cut out that. Richarlison can then pop it off to Simons, and a nice bit of play with Simons there, kind of creating that triangle, and then he switches the ball out to the right hand side, and you can see Porro and Kudus there. Simons switches it out to him, out to Pedro Porro, gives it to Mohamed Kudus, who's comfortable in these kind of tight areas, drops the shoulder, beats the man as he so often does. Then he can get that ball back to Pedro Porro. The value of them kind of working is that partnership. They're looking to kind of create these angles for the crosses, those two working together, and that's what Thomas Frank really likes. Pedro Porro is such a good deliverer of the ball from those kind of wide positions. Keeper makes a mess of it, but it's a good cross, a dangerous cross, and look at the amount of bodies that you've got in and around there to kind of pick up the pieces. And this is also where you see Simons' quality and his ability to think quickly in these kind of areas here. Just delay, sort of that little dummy, delays, gets the ball past Pepe, and then this little back heel to Spence. Lovely stuff there. Little back heel into Spence, into Richarlison. Richarlison can get to the line, probably should cut it back to Spence here to score. But again, Porro and Kudus' dynamic on that right-hand side and relationship is something that I am really enjoying. And I think you can get good things out of Simons and Spence as a pair on that left-hand side when the game does become a little bit more transitional. It's more when the game is kind of in a more structured state where Villarreal are a bit more set here, like Spurs. I think they'll take a goal kick quickly in this instance. Sarr gets it out to Simons, and this is what you do want to see. And this is where Spence, with that engine that he has got, can be really valuable on the overlap. And he can put crosses in with his left foot, but again, he almost panics and kind of takes it a little bit too quickly because he's not comfortable really going to the line and allowing for more time to get players in the box and maybe standing up like a clipped cross. Whereas he kind of does it first time and it just sort of breaks down to the deflected cross that goes to the keeper. So it can work there, but also I think it's much better with a doggy because a doggy can just open up and drive into that area rather than sort of panicking and taking the cross first time, if you get what I mean. But it still did sort of cause some issues when we were building up with these kind of two being on the same line here. Again, a lot of passes just recycled back into the centre because of the angles that Spence is sort of playing at. You can see him out there. They're on the same line. Simons is back to goal. Can't do loads with it every single time, but it's actually in this example where you see another piece of Simons' magic where he does get that back heel off to Spence, who then can go around him and then drive inside and try to clip that ball to switch the play. And that is the value of those two being able to combine at times. It can work, but I just don't think it's going to work as much as we want. But when it does pay off, you are able to kind of, where they both want to come inside, you kind of draw in players to them, and then you kind of can create these sort of overloads where you've got three men on that right-hand side. So again, you're kind of seeing the positives and the negatives of it. I just didn't think we really saw it necessarily enough. And I don't think you're going to see them work together on a kind of more consistent occasion, because things are going to break down more often than not because we're not kind of creating the optimal angles for those two to thrive with each other. But Simons' quality, you can make something out of tight situations. He's good when he does feel contact, like he kind of embraces it, and because of his low centre of gravity, he kind of can get away and wriggle away at times as well and can create those brilliant off-the-cuff moments. But I do worry it's not necessarily that sustainable. Again, you sort of see an example here. Some nice build-up play actually from Spurs out from the back. Bentancur into Van der Ven, into Sarr. And again, it's sometimes, is Sarr really the man that you want to be receiving in these kind of areas because he does check back. He's not comfortable necessarily turning on the ball in those areas and really opening the pitch up. He then goes out to Spence, out to Simons, who kind of comes back inside. And then Spurs sort of have to just work backwards. And then we go out long to Mohamed Kudus. Again, in the same breath, like as much as we can be critical of it, byline. So again, you're seeing the kind of the good and the bad in all of it, really. Like, there are limitations building up in that way with those two on that left-hand side, because you are funneling the ball back a lot of the time. You're not really able to progress, and you're not really getting Simmons in the areas that he does want. But you are able then to create those switches, get those overloads maybe on the other side at times. There is a little bit of a payoff to it as well, or you can work the ball back centrally, and then you can move the ball then back over as we did here. But again, you're not necessarily getting the best out of Spence. Do you want a doggy over there who can maybe take the ball to the byline and get a cross in? It's just not necessarily optimal, but there's good and there's bad moments in it. Another way Spurs can maybe sort of fix the build-up is maybe building up in a pivot rather than a sort of a 4-3-3 with the sole midfielder kind of dropping in here. When you've got Bentancur and Sarr, this kind of allowed for better options and better angles for us to move the ball and open it up quickly. Sarr drops in there, plays that first-time ball to Romero, and then Romero is kind of able to break this line here where he gets it into Bergvall as more as that free man up the pitch, as that free kind of number 10 rather than having two on the last line. It allowed you to open up spaces a little bit quicker through moving the ball quickly. Sarr kind of playing that bounce pass back into Romero to just move them over, moving the ball quickly, but also giving Bergvall the freedom in that kind of 10 to receive the ball in the on the half turn in these kind of areas, and he draws a foul from that. So there's value to be gained from building up maybe in a 2 rather than having a single pivot in Bentancur. And in the second half, when you saw Romero kind of misplace those 2 passes in quick succession, I think it's because he hasn't really got those options, and he's trying that higher risk ball to kind of almost bypass the midfield to get it into the front line here. He's only got that kind of option in Bentancur there, and he maybe wants to take more of a risk. It's sloppy, it's poor, but you can understand why he's doing it. He's kind of forcing it a little bit to try and just get Spurs up the pitch rather than playing it into the single pivot. Things just kind of breaking down and Spurs recycling the ball from side to side. And they lose it here, and it actually leads to that chance. And then you see him do it again where he's only got that kind of single option. You've got Bergvall and Sarr high there. I know on Saturday I was talking about the fact that maybe you can commit those 8s rather than dropping them back, but there's kind of positives and negatives to all of it, really, right? It kind of allows you, it kind of forces you to kind of force these passes at times, and when you are kind of playing at home against teams that are going to sit off a little bit more, kind of think having that 2 there at times to just draw them out and then open up the space a little bit, I think can add value there. But where Bentancur's his only kind of real passing option, it's kind of having to play the riskier pass to try and break the lines with Sarr and Bergvall push further forward. So if one of them could maybe drop in at the right time to help progress the ball, then that could solve some of these issues too. But to end on more of a positive in terms of the midfield, I did think our out of possession shape was really good, like I said, with our pressing, but also our ability to kind of win the ball back here in these kind of situations. This is what Bentancur is good at, very good at kind of reading the game and kind of picking up on these sort of loose passes. Plays that pass into Kudus, and it kind of leads to this opportunity for him to run at goal and have a chance. So out of possession, I do think that midfield, there was a lot of value to be had in that. And also in these kind of games, there's a lot of value to be had with Paulinho coming in as that closer. I thought he was really good when he came on yesterday. And in terms of the build-up as well, Paulinho, he might not give you so much on the half turn being able to break the lines, but what he can do is drop that little bit deeper and kind of spray these passes. We haven't really got someone that will do that. Sarr doesn't really do that. Bergvall can do it, but again, we've seen him deployed further up the pitch under Frank so far. Bentancur doesn't really have that in his locker so much. So you see him kind of drop there, spray the pass out to Pedro Porro, and it allows you, like I said at the start of the video, we're kind of having 2 men on the inside and 1 on the outside here to kind of create these little combinations. Porro can fire it off to Bergvall first time and gets Bergvall in a really good crossing opportunity. It's a lovely attempted ball, but the defender cuts it out. But again, you see Paulinho come back into the frame here. Spurs, again, deploying that aggressive press to try and win the ball back. But Paulinho jumps, reads it, gets in there, and then Spurs can recycle the ball out wide to Mohamed Kudus. Again, who's got the threat of kind of going both ways. It does sort of break down. He loses it, but who's there to kind of back him up and win it back? João Paulinho. And then it allows Kudus to kind of get back, reset. Again, you've got these better combinations on this right-hand side with kind of 2 in... Oh, I don't know why it's a curved one. You kind of got the 2 on the inside and then 1 on the outside. Allows you to kind of open up better angles, get Porro in this kind of half-space crossing position, but he can also fire off that first-time pass to Kudus, who again is very good at going both ways, can go to the byline here, or can get this really good cross in, and it's such a good ball in. Lovely angle for him to that back post. And Richarlison should maybe score. So I thought Paulinho added a lot when he came on as well in terms of that out-possession structure, but also being able to switch the play and just move things a little bit more quickly. So overall, there was kind of a lot to unpack, and I do feel a little bit better after re-watching the game again. I kind of came away from the game feeling a little bit underwhelmed, with feeling like we had a lot of work to do. But again, it's very, very early days. Like, we're trying to build that solid structure and solid foundation first, and I do think the attacking patterns will come. We've played 5 games so far. We've only conceded 1 goal, 4 clean sheets, 4 wins. So I'm really, really happy with that as a start, and I do think the rest of it will come. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like it for me. Make sure to subscribe as well and let me know your thoughts. Nice one.